On the road to riches speeding, I just hope I'm not lost. Lost some homies, learn the way for them, I gotta push on. If you ain't here, it'll work, bustin', you can get lost. Thought my heart was freezing, gotta let it defrost. On the road to riches speeding, I just hope I'm not lost. Lost some homies, learn the way for them, I gotta push on. If you ain't here, it'll work, bustin', you can get lost. Thought my heart was freezing, gotta let it defrost. Breaking from my younger siblings, tryna get a million. Just want them to be good in the instance I'm gone. Hold my actions show I love you, cause my words might not.
Welcome to the second episode of the Minnesota Mike's podcast. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. Thank you all so much for sticking with me. First episode dropped on Tuesday, and so far, let's just say my goal was just to have double-digit downloads, as I don't really have a social media following personally, and so obviously the business's social media following is very new, and let's just say we smashed that goal. And so it's gotten a lot of positive feedback. I've listened to it, unfortunately, too many times, and so I've heard the cringeworthy moments, and I've also heard a lot of positive things to build off of, and so I definitely think that there's something good brewing here, and there's going to be some good content provided for Minnesota sports fans. So it is 12:15 a.m. Eastern time. I am in Clearwaterbeach, Florida, recording this episode of Minnesota Mike's podcast. This one's a little funky. The intro and the closing are happening after the Gopher football game, and the middle of the podcast is an interview that I had with Evan of the Daily Wolves podcast and the Daily Wolves on Twitter's social media account. So a good chunk of this episode is talking Timberwolves basketball, which is really exciting. Can't think of a better time to be a Wolves fan than right now. I mean, that roster is as talented as it gets. But in this beginning, I'm going to start off by talking some Gopher football. And I'm also want to go over, as Friday and Saturday, we begin week one, technically, of college football. I kind of want to go over my Big Ten and SEC football predictions, just to kind of get that on the record. I dropped those last week, and already a couple of my picks in the Big Ten West are not making me look too good. But regardless, I'll own it, and we'll see how it plays out. So to start, big win, epic win for the Golden Gopher football team as they beat the New Mexico State Aggies led by Jerry Hill 38-0 at home, Huntington Bank Stadium. I saw this game in a bar in Clearwaterbeach, Florida. And so that was a whole nother story. The bar that I was watching in is in my hotel. And there was a Packers bar, so that's kind of weird. I walk in there, it's a Packers bar, but they have Big Ten Network because they like the Packers and they like the Badgers. The owners weren't there. So I show up wearing my Golden Gophers T-shirt and watching the Gophers versus New Mexico State. So a good chunk of the bar was probably like, what the heck? Wow, there's some good games going on. And yet this guy has one of the mini TVs that were in there on New Mexico State versus University of Minnesota. Anywho, it's a Packers bar. I'm in there. I'm a Gopher fan. I'm sitting next to an older gentleman who is he's from Wisconsin, so he's a Badgers fan. That started off really awkward. Just he was not a very nice guy at first, but we ended up being friends. So that was interesting. And then this young, beautiful black couple and their kids come in, decked out in Gopher gear, and they were just the biggest Gopher fans, which was just random as all you know what. It's a random bar in Clearwater Beach, Florida. A lot of Gopher fans, a Badgers fan, and it's a Packer bar. But it turned out to be a fun night. So me and that other couple and their kids were singing the Rouser after a lot of the Gopher touchdowns. It just was a great time. I'm not going to break down on this game a lot. I think you're going to see a lot of publications in the next few days that'll do a lot better job of breaking it down than I will. And on top of that, me watching from the bar, I didn't get to see, as much as I typically would if I was actually at Huntington Bank Stadium or if I was actually, at home watching it. But from what I saw, it looked like objective met. If you're a gambler, we beat the spread. I think the spread was 36.5, 37, something like that. 138-0. It was a shutout. That's always great. New Mexico State's not very good. But it was almost a bit emotional seeing Mo Ibrahim come back from an Achilles injury, which is typically a killer for running backs. That man, it appeared, missed out on possible millions of dollars, and now looks like he's healthy. He looked great. He looked fantastic, and so that was really good to see. So overall, yeah, it was total domination. They looked good. Tanner Morgan looked good. The receivers looked good. O line, from what I saw, looked good. I think the right side, there were some struggles, and it appears that the right guard Axel Rushmeyer was hurt. So I believe Nathan Bowe of Lakeville North came out and played for him. Hopefully Axel is okay. But otherwise, that's the only injury I know of. So I'm sure we'll learn more, and you'll hear about the stats. Mo is chasing the all-time Gopher touchdown record. Looks like he passed Lawrence Maroney today, if I'm not mistaken. At the very least, tied him, but I believe he passed him. So yeah, overall, this was good. It didn't appear to be a ton of injuries. Let's knock on wood. And we got the W. And from everything I saw, it looked pretty good all the way around. But keep in mind, this was New Mexico State on a short week going up against the Golden Gophers. They didn't have a chance. And we dominated. We did what we were supposed to do. Okay, so now allow me to pull up my photos, and I am going to go over my Big Ten and SEC picks for the 2022 college football season. So I dropped these over the course of the last week, and obviously football really hasn't quite started yet. Saturday will be the first big Saturday, but there was a few games week 0 that we'll see kind of busted my bracket, if you will, a little. But it was week 0 technically, so it's still early. Let's start off with the Big Ten West to not leave you all in too much suspense. So I've got the Gophers winning the Big Ten West this year at 10-2, followed by Wisconsin at 9-3, Iowa third place at 8-4, Nebraska got them in fourth place at 7-5. Looks like the same on Nebraska, but we'll see. It's a long season. I've got Purdue at 7-5, so Nebraska and Purdue tied for fourth. I've got Illinois at 5-7, just barely missing a bowl game. And lastly, I've got Northwestern at 3-9. Well, they've already won one of those 3 games against Nebraska. So looks like the middle towards the bottom of my Big Ten West rankings or predictions could be pretty wacky, but the top looks pretty good. That Golden Gopher team looks like a contender for the Big Ten West at the very least. So I feel pretty good about that. Big Ten East, I've got Ohio State winning it at 11-1, Michigan being 11-1. So they'll likely lose to at Iowa. I'm sorry, I believe they'll actually lose to Ohio State, and so I believe Ohio State will have the tiebreaker there. So Ohio State first place in the East, followed by Michigan at 11-1, both same records, but Ohio State wins the head-to-head. I've got Penn State at 8-4. It's like they just barely squeaked out a win today over Purdue. Michigan State also at 8-4. I believe Penn State will beat Michigan State this year. I've got Maryland at 7-5, Rutgers at 5-7, just barely missing a bowl game. And I've got Indiana as the worst team in the Big Ten this year at 2-10. Oddly enough, again, I'm not much of a sports gambler, but every now and then maybe I'll dabble a little. I believe Indiana is projected to beat Illinois tomorrow, so that's really odd to me. I'd be jumping all over that. So let's just see here. So I'd like to do the Big Ten and the SEC, and that's no disrespect to the Big 12, the Pac-12, or the ACC, but it just appears that those are the 2 dominant conferences right now. The SEC for sure, and so let's just give credit to where it's due. They're the prettiest girl at the ball at the moment. But the Big Ten is no slouch, and so those appear. And with this new TV contract deal, with everything in the future of college football, it appears that we may be looking at a Power 2 conference as opposed to a Power 5, meaning the Big Ten and the SEC could be the next, 2 power conferences. But regardless, let's get into my SEC predictions. We'll start with the SEC West. I've got Alabama at 12-0. Second place, Texas A&M 9-3. Third place, Ole Miss 8-4. Fourth place, LSU 7-5. Tied with Arkansas at 7-5. I got LSU winning that head-to-head matchup. Mississippi State and Auburn at 6-6. So of the SEC teams, of all 14 of them, I believe, I've only got one team missing the bowl, the playoffs, I guess you could say, and that's at Vanderbilt 2-10. So the SEC East already dropped the nugget that I've got Vanderbilt as last place at 2-10. Georgia, I've got them one in the East at 12-0. So Alabama and Georgia, I do not believe play each other this year. So I've got them both going undefeated. I've got Kentucky at 9-3, Florida, who I'll be watching at the Swamp here on Saturday versus the seventh ranked Utah Utes. I've got Florida at third place in the East, edging out Tennessee and South Carolina at 8-4. I've got Tennessee at 7-5, South Carolina 7-5. Tennessee winning the head-to-head matchup there. I've got Missouri at 6-6, and as mentioned, I've got Vanderbilt at 2-10. So the SEC East winner, Georgia. SEC West winner, Alabama. The Big Ten West winner, or Big Ten East winner, let's say Ohio State, and the Big Ten West winner is your Minnesota Golden Gophers. Finally break through and win the SEC West and take a trip to Indianapolis. This is the year. Book your trips to Indy. You heard it here, folks, live from Minnesota Mike Sports Podcast. Now let's go ahead and get in the interview. So we talked our Gopher football. Let's get in the interview with my man Evan of the Daily Wolves podcast. This is going to be a great content for you all. And if you're Wolves fans, you're in for a treat. If you're not big Wolves fans, hopefully you can become Wolves fans, and this would be a great person to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a special treat in store for you today. Now, this is my main man here, Evan. Evan and me actually just met, but I was following Evan all last year. If you're a Timberwolves fan, you may have heard of a Wolves social media account on Twitter called The Daily Wolves. If you listen to Basketball or Timberwolves podcast, you probably heard of the Daily Wolves podcast. It's probably my favorite Timberwolves podcast, and hands down my favorite social media account. I'll get into why a little bit later, but without further ado, I introduce you to Evan, the host of the Daily Wolves podcast. Evan, thanks for joining me, man. How are you, good sir?
Hey, I appreciate you having me on today, Mike. It's been crazy. I've been busy lately. Today's one of my days off, so I could finally make it in. But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk Timberwolves basketball. It's an exciting time for the Minnesota Timberwolves, man.
Yes, it is. Man, I was a casual fan. So I'm gonna start off by I'll admit I was a casual. I wasn't in the trenches like you the last decade or so. And I honestly, if you're a casual Minnesota Timberwolves fan out there, I don't blame you because for the most part, they haven't really given us a reason to buy in. And this team last year, there were two people. I'll get a little long-winded here. There were two people that made me into more of a core fan and now a first-time season ticket holder. The main one is D'Lo, and that's a whole nother story. But just to briefly go over it, D'Lo called out the fans. I think he used a expletive, basically saying we were quiet, and challenged us to stand until the first shot. For me, I never can recall a Timberwolves player actually saying something that showed that they even cared about the fan environment. And I'm not trying to say that there hasn't been. I've been a casual fan, but for me, that was just like, wow. So this dude's not just getting paid to go out there and lose. He actually cares. He wants to turn it up a notch. I answered the call, and when I went to the Target Center, it was just lit last year. Second person, and I know I'm long-winded, but I'll shorten it up here, is Evan of the Daily Wolves social media account on Twitter. Evan, your profile would give out a lot of free tickets, and for me, I was like, okay, I'll take these tickets. I got probably 6 games from you, I would say, give or take. And it was awesome. It made me feel like engaged. It made me feel like the organization cared. I'm not sure how you went about it, but yeah, Evan. So yeah, thank you for joining me. And you were so right. Exciting time. I cannot wait till next year to be in the Target Center.
Yeah, it's quite the turnaround in Minnesota. It's been a long time that the Minnesota Timberwolves have been like they have been overlooked in Minnesota. Like nobody looked at the Wolves as an exciting team in Minnesota. People that grew up, before you and I, they grew up knowing only that the Timberwolves were bad. They never grew up knowing that KG had those years. Yeah, they had heard about it, but they never grew up knowing that the Wolves, the Target Center used to be packed. Sam Cassell was here. KG had the place rocking. Flip Saunders was an amazing coach. They'd only heard about him. And so just getting the excitement back up in Minnesota, it's been great. The turnaround's been great. It's kind of started back with Jimmy Butler. It was kind of like the dipping the toes, in the water a little bit, kind of got people back on board, but that was just short and sweet. And then they took another step back. But I really think the whole addition of Anthony Edwards was that draft with Anthony Edwards and bringing in Jaden McDaniels. That was the draft that like changed the whole thing for this franchise. And at the time, nobody knew that that was going to be a big, huge changing moment in Minnesota.
Oh, absolutely. And next time we meet, we could probably do the whole segment on Anthony Edwards. Game changer. I love his potential. I love his game right now. He's already an impact player. But before we get there, we talked about what type of fan I was. I was a casual. There's a lot of those
Yeah.
casuals, and we need those guys. We need them and ladies. We need those people to buy in. But my next question for you, what made you
Mhm.
become a Wolves fan? When did you become a Wolves fan? And if you want to mind sharing that with me and my audience.
Oh yeah, no problem. So ever since I was, can remember, I grew up playing soccer and basketball. That was my two favorite sports when I grew up as a kid. I was always basketball and soccer. I played back in like, back on like those club teams and whatever when you're a little kid and growing up and whatever you got, in your community, right? And so not only did I enjoy playing basketball, but then going forward, like we would have different events where we would get, I don't know exactly how it was organized, but they would have, all us, kid teams be able to come to Target Center and to play games on the court together and the stuff they do for the kids, right? And I just remember stepping out in Target Center when I was just a little kid and seeing the court and that the Timberwolves played on, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world when you're a kid, right? And then not only that, my dad was super big into basketball when I grew up. So my dad would always pull me out of school like early and stuff to go down to the arena. And I remember he'd take me out early, even though like we would have made it if we went out a little bit later to after school got done. But my dad pulled me out a little early anyway. And I just remember every all the kids being like, "Oh, your dad's just the coolest kid, man." And I remember that clearly. Like that's a memory I hold like dear to my heart. Just like my dad getting me into it, seeing the players warm up, just like that whole experience, the smell of the stadium, just like you smell the food cooking and like it just gets you everything flowing in your veins. And I just think that excitement back then when KG was there and seeing how the Timberwolves were full house every day, I think that was just really cool. That's how I got into being a Wolves fan.
Thank you for sharing that, man. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those little events when you're playing and you're a youngin, you're playing. Yeah, I remember we played in the Metrodome. We were in like eighth grade. That's huge. I just couldn't help but laugh at the difference of dichotomies of our fathers. When I went with
Yep.
my dad, God bless him, rest in peace. He was a cheap as you know what. We would always sit in like the very top level, but I didn't matter. I loved it.
Yes.
And
Same here.
he was the type where you almost felt guilty asking him if can I buy a Sprite or a candy because you could just see it break his wallet.
Yep.
So, yeah, our fathers got hyped for the game a little bit differently, but yeah, I remember those memories. Of my father being a Target Center. So yeah, that's awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question I have for you is, about the casual fans. A lot of us, not myself, I actually was in it most of the season, but a lot of folks that tuned in towards the end of the year when things got really exciting, the play-in game, the playoffs was a bit of a letdown, and it wasn't. I think the typical Minnesota fan is saying, "Oh, typical Minnesota again." We get this team that seemingly is better than Memphis, and they
Yeah.
lose in the most Minnesota fashion ever. And so I'd like to know, you were in the trenches, you paid attention, you know that Memphis is good too, but what are your thoughts on last year and just what type of taste does that leave in your mouth?
So last year, I think the Timberwolves it's probably the most fun team that I've ever seen since being a kid again. I've talked about that before. I know Dane Moore, who I've had on my show. I love Dane Moore, a great friend of the show, but Dane's talked about it before. Kyle Tighe, another guy I love, who's talked about it before. Just kind of that we all were like enjoy the ride right now. Like people needed to appreciate last year, like what the team was, whether they were a casual fan or they were somebody who's been following the team for a while. Because when you're a team like that, you're taking a step forward and you're really becoming a good team and you're overachieving in the expectations. They already overachieved last year, and like Vegas had them at like 34 wins or something like that, and they got over 10 wins more, right?
Hmm.
And so you got to look at it as like they weren't expected to be there. So everything they got over 34 and a half from the line was positive. And so it's not going to be like that this year. And what I mean by that is like last year they didn't have the expectation of being a good team, being a contender potentially, being a team that could make a run past the first round. They were just like all the expectation was literally making the play-in game, not even the playoffs, the play-in
Bluetooth
game.
disconnected. Bluetooth
So
connected.
I think it's such a big thing because it's like they didn't have that thing where it was gonna be, oh, you're gonna be disappointed if Minnesota doesn't make it past the second round, right?
Right, right. No, you're
And
totally right.
so
Yeah, I didn't mean to
yeah,
interrupt, but yeah, this year, what is the line? If you're a BM or a better, gosh, what is it like 48? Which I honestly think is too low, but that's a big difference from less than 50%
yeah.
win percentage, like you just said.
I think this year the like DraftKings or FanDuel, I don't remember which one, it has us at 47 and a half. It's
Mm.
basically 48. It's uh some other places have us at 49, 49 and a half. I've seen it all over the board. I think everything is too low. I think the Timberwolves floor minimum is going to be 50 wins, like
Oh,
absolute minimum.
well,
That's just
you
my
led me to
opinion.
my next question. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, no
Audience,
problem.
I'm sorry if you heard the Bluetooth come in and out. I'm in Clearwaterbeach, Florida, and it's random spurts of hurricanes here. So, uh, but no, Evan, my next question was about next year. So last year, and I
Yeah,
do love the way you broke that down. I do think fans have a little perspective, man. This team was one of the youngest teams in the league. They had no expectations. And if you actually just watch the eye test, a lot of those games that they lost, the way they lost them, yeah, a lot of people use words that are harsh, pathetic, and just epically bad, historically bad, whatever the case. It sucks to see those huge swings, but if you watched, it didn't look like it was like effort. It didn't look like those dudes didn't like each other. They were busting their, what off out there. Memphis is good. We should have won that series. But regardless, next question. Well, I know how you feel
mhm.
about last year. You kind of gave some nuggets, but about next year, you mentioned the spread about
Yeah.
47 and a half. How do you feel we'll do next year?
So next year, I'm before the Rudy Gobert trade. It's kind of like I'm still excited. I think in Minnesota, you should have been excited before the trade. I think they would have taken a step forward, and it wouldn't have been out of the question for them to win 50 games before the Rudy Gobert trade. After the trade comes in, it's crazy because you're taking the Timberwolves last year when they go into the playoffs, their biggest weaknesses were going to be rebounding the ball on the offensive end. And then on top of that, they couldn't defend the paint. I mean, Karl Towns was one of the highest players in the NBA at fouling, and he just could not stay out of foul trouble and he couldn't guard the paint. And so you come in and you take the two biggest weakness from the Minnesota Timberwolves and you really bring in Rudy Gobert, who's the best offensive big man, or arguably the best rebounding big man in the NBA. And on top of that, he's an all defensive player. He's going to be a future Hall of Fame player. Once you make three all NBA teams in your career, you're going to pretty much be a lock for the Hall of Fame, regardless of the rest of your career. So he's pretty much a lock right now as a Hall of Fame kind of player. And so they just stepped back and Tim Conley that came in really just said like, what can I do to make Minnesota better? And so just adding Rudy Gobert, a guy who's going to do that. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Rudy Gobert he's played in the NBA for 9 years, and his first rookie season was his lowest win season in Utah at 48 wins. Other than that, he's had 50 wins or more every single year in his career. So Rudy Gobert is the ultimate floor raiser for any team.
Totally, and that's in the Western Conference, dude.
Exactly.
Right, that's huge in Utah. So that's not exactly a massive market. I'd say we're probably a bigger market than Salt Lake, or about the
Mhm.
same. So no, totally. Okay, great. And I'm right on board with you, man. I think this team, no limits. They can win probably 60 games if they really, if things really click right. God willing, we stay
Good.
healthy. So, you never know how it works. Now let's see here. The next question I had, it probably does flow right. But before we do that, this is just a little off topic. Your background is dope. me and you kind of had a pre
Yeah,
meeting call, and so you sort of showed me. But I think our fans could see it. The pictures coming in clear. You got the cool Slam magazines. Your head's blocking the one with the KG and D'Lo and Booker. But of all those, which one do you think is
yeah,
your favorite?
that's probably the Evo one up here.
Yep. Now we can see them all. But no, you cool where you're at. Yeah, my favorite's probably yeah, the one that's the one with all three, Devin Booker, D'Lo, and Cat. Which one's your favorite up
Yeah,
there?
definitely that one, 100%. I just think it's so cool. Like they have the old school jerseys on, all three of them. Back for anybody who knows that magazine cover, and they were both kind of breaking into the league as all star level players. They're all friends. I thought that was the coolest thing that they all remained friends and they all did like talks about in the magazine that they eventually like want to play on the same team together. That's like their goal someday is to all three play together before their career's over. So it's super cool. I love the magazine.
That's a dope magazine, man. Very good. Okay. Well, I got you for we got a little bit here. We got some lighthearted
Yeah,
topics at the end, to soften this up a little bit. But I think our Wolves fans are gonna be proud. A lot of us are starving, and we got the season
yeah,
coming up here before you know it. And so, and also on top of that, a lot of the talk right now in Minnesota is about football. Understandably so. We got our Vikings and our Gophers play here pretty soon. As we're recording this here, my times are all messed up. I'm in Florida, so I'm on Eastern. Evans in Arizona, or is that Mountain Time, if I'm not mistaken? So,
yeah. It's a mountain time for sure. But
it,
right now we're on West Coast time. So basically, yeah, we're California time right here, right? For now.
at this
It's
point of this
yeah,
podcast, you're probably listening to this after the Gopher football team is going to probably beat New Mexico State. So, but anywho, one more question for you, a few more. Next one would be Western Conference next year. The Wolves aren't the only good team, but boy, our roster is tough to match, second to none, in my opinion. But if we were second or third or fourth, who would those other teams be, and what is going to be our biggest challenge to win the Western Conference?
yeah, so well, the West is definitely it's a tough conference, no doubt. The It's pretty top heavy in my opinion. It kind of drops off later, towards around 7, 8-ish, probably towards 8. But so that's gonna be the plan. Phoenix is gonna be good again. They're not going anywhere. Golden State's good again. The Clippers are you can only assume with Kawhi Leonard coming back. Hopefully you never want a player to be struggling through health. So hopefully Kawhi's himself. But if he is, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George are definitely they're tough, right? So the Clippers are going to be contender favorites. So those teams ahead of Minnesota, I'd probably say you could argue those are ahead of Minnesota. I still think uh, Phoenix is going to drop off a little bit. That's just my bold prediction. I think the Timberwolves will take that spot as the 3 seed, and they'll be right in there. That's just my prediction. I think Chris Paul's getting older. Few things slide the Wolves' way, and you dodge a little bit of the injury bug. Maybe you don't. You can't really control injuries, right? But Chris Paul is only getting older. That's all I say. And so I just think with the acquisition of Rudy Gobert, it's probably the best team Rudy Gobert's ever played on, talent wise. It's better than the best team that won 60 wins in Utah, in my opinion, from front to back.
What a time to be alive as a Timberwolves fan. Think about that. We're talking about possible top three or top four seed in the Western Conference. And even in our
Hmm.
heyday with KG, when those were some great teams, I mean, we were lucky. It was tough to make the eighth seed back then with Sacramento and Denver and all those squads. The epic dynasty, you could call it, with San Antonio. So, yeah, the Western Conference, this won't be easy. But I agree with you. Top three or four seeds definitely within reach. Who knows? Maybe even further. So hey, thank you for being on. I've got a few more questions, but they're going to be. We'll step away from the Wolves here. I want people to get to know you because your social media
Yeah,
page on Twitter is awesome, and I think it's only going to help grow the Timberwolves fan base. On top of
yeah.
them actually winning. Um, Next question for you, Evan. Let's see here. So I'm a huge Minnesota sports fan. It's in the name of the podcast, Minnesota Mike's podcast. My question for you, I believe you're from Minnesota. Can you explain that a little bit? And then on top of that, although you currently live in Arizona, who's your
Yeah.
favorite non Timberwolves Minnesota sports team?
Yeah, so I'm from Minnesota, grew up in that area. I just moved to Arizona about a year ago, and so I'm pretty new here. Definitely definitely still miss things about Minnesota, no doubt. But even though I live here, I'm never gonna stop supporting the team. Don't miss the cold. That's one of the things I love, not having to do another winter here. But definitely a big sports fan of all the professional teams, right? So I'm looking forward to the Vikings this year. I'm excited to see what Kevin O'Connell's going to do. I'm excited to see Justin Jefferson claiming the throne of the best receiver over Cooper Kupp in the NFL. And I'm excited to see Irv Smith Jr. hopefully stay healthy this year, get a run. They're looking good. Daniil Hunter, they got Zadarius Smith. If those guys can stay healthy, I think they got a real chance to be a good team.
I agree, man. First game, I could be getting it wrong. I think it's September 11th. But it's a
September 11th, it's the
yes
Packers, right?
against the Packers. Man, and this team I feel good about. Now it's hard to really exactly know. They made a lot of changes, including just last night, with dropping a few players that we were also shocked by. And, like they just traded for the Detroit Lions backup quarterback after trading for Mullins a few weeks ago. So it's a lot going on there. We got the new GM, and Cam, they call him. And so there's his initials. And so I know he's making moves. He's putting stamp on this thing, but I feel good about it. The roster, we don't question the talent. It's just if they could shore up a few
Exactly.
things, the NFC is wide open. I do think that this could be the year, but unlike the Timberwolves, the Vikings, the only thing they haven't accomplished is actually winning the Super Bowl. And so that's what makes it tough as a Vikings fan is if that's the only thing you got to do, that's not easy. And sometimes you could have the best team and injuries or just stuff just doesn't shake out the right way. So that's what makes it a bit anticlimactic with them every year is if it's almost win or bust. And but regardless, it's a Viking state. I'm excited for it. I'm glad to hear you're a Vikings fan. Um, One thing I want to touch on, you said Arizona. You recently moved there, and you're absolutely right. I imagine the weather is much better there in the winter than it is where I live in Minneapolis. And so I'm hoping to go to a road game for a Wolves Suns game. Maybe you'll have to catch up there. But when you travel back to the Twin Cities, what are some places that you like to eat? Any good food reviews for us?
So when I go back to the Twin Cities, I'm definitely going to hit up. I love going to the Parlor. I think
Oh
it's
yeah,
in yeah, the Parlor because I know they have the Parlor Burger in the Target Center, which I'm sure people have seen. But just the Parlor itself, I
unfortunately, I know
love going.
all too well about the Parlor Burger in the or the Target Center, so I know too well about
Right?
that. Unfortunately,
It's even better when it's better in the restaurant than it is at the Target Center, which obviously
agreed.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then they make a, a perfect old fashioned for anyone who loves those
Can you
and
say that
kind of
one more
has a
time? A
sweet
perfect what now? I'm sorry.
old fashioned.
Oh
You hear
yeah.
me?
Okay. Yep. I can hear you. My bad.
Yeah,
It may have been my audio. My bad.
it's okay. They make like a perfect old fashioned, one of my favorites that I found anywhere. Uh the ambiance kind of feels like a speakeasy when you go into the restaurant, and so I just like that vibe. I also I love going to it's like the Tea House. It's in Minneapolis. It's an Asian
Yeah.
restaurant. I love
Mm-hmm.
just in that place. And then probably just getting like we've talked about before we were on the live. I love getting deep dish pizza when I go. It's not even a specific place. It's just they don't have good deep dish pizza down in Arizona. So just getting deep dish pizza, man, I miss that. And you don't miss it till it's gone. I'll tell you that much. But those are what I really love when I go home for sure.
All right. Well, shoot, that's got me hungry for some Giordano's or something like that when I get back to the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
So, man, yeah, I can't thank you enough. I actually am looking forward to connecting with you more. And yeah, this is my first year as a season ticket holder when I'm in
Yeah.
section
That
104. So, yeah, we'll have
okay.
to link up. But I'm a big fan, folks. If you haven't checked him out, Evan is with the Daily Wolves. So the Daily Wolves, you can find them on Twitter at the Daily Wolves, I believe, correct?
Yep, yep.
The
At the
handle.
Daily Wolves Twitter. Our podcast is on Apple or Spotify by just searching the Daily Wolves. Um, and we're trying to post pretty much weekly stuff. We've been off for a week or two here. Obviously, it's the slow season. We just got through August. That's the slowest time in the NBA. So it's going to start ramping up because training camp starts at the end of September, and then it's going to be really go time. Pretty soon here, the Timberwolves are probably going to reveal their new jerseys. I'm sure it's a marketing scheme. They're kind of like waiting right now. I think they're going to do it sometime the next few weeks before training camp. I'm assuming that's their goal. So I've heard they're getting rid of the green jerseys. That's what I've heard. Can't confirm 100%, but I've heard that, and from people that I trust, and they're getting a different jersey. I don't know what it is. It's not the rainbow jerseys that everyone's seen. That's a different jersey. I still heard those are coming as well on the side of a new jersey. And I don't know anything about anything other than that. It's going to be really exciting. I'm glad you're a season ticket holder. Anyone who isn't should hop on right now because, like, I'm not just saying that because I like the Wolves. I mean, they're offering the 50% off all the concessions, whether it's
and,
alcohol or
and
food,
alcohol. Yeah, that's the big
and,
thing. Yep.
and the whole store, whether you want to go get a new jersey or, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I've been a season ticket holder for years, and they have never offered something like that. And so,
They're the best one
getting
out of all the sports I have. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Evan, but I'm Gopher Football season tickets, Twins season tickets. Yeah, I think the Twins is it's nice. It's 20% off, and that's something's better than nothing. But
better than nothing, yeah.
50%, man, that is very generous, dude. It's never been a better time to be a season ticket holder.
They're going to change it next year. That's what I've heard too. So this is the last year that they're going to do that offer, and
Uh,
and they won't have to do it anymore because they'll be good. They're going to sell tickets regardless. And so that was the whole deal, was a marketing scheme, right? And
mm-hmm.
so if you aren't one right now, I'd hop on because I think they're gonna go deeper in the playoffs. You get the priority access to getting playoff tickets, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a great year. I'm coming back. We're looking like the 28th of October. Never drop that anywhere else, but I'll drop it on your podcast. 28th of October is right in the beginning of the year. They're facing the LA Lakers. So LeBron James, Patrick Beverley's return. I'll be there for sure. Me, I think Tripp's coming too potentially, but for sure myself, I will be there live in the flesh at Target Center.
You heard it here live, folks, on the Minnesota Mike's podcast. Evan will be here. I can't wait to late October to watch, and I might have to give Pat Bev a standing ovation, man. Gonna miss him, but I feel good about his situation and ours. It worked out for the best for both. Evan, man, thank you so much. My man, I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Truly appreciate it, my brother.
I appreciate you, and if you come out to Phoenix November 1st, I'll be at that game out in Phoenix. So definitely, I have tickets already for that game. But if you come out, that's the game I'll be at.
We'll link up. We'll have to make that happen. All right, my man. You take care now.
You take care. Thanks.
Well, folks, that'll just about do it for the second episode of the Minnesota Mike's podcast. I really hope you all enjoyed the show. And before we end this thing, I'd like to briefly touch on one more game, which is coming up here. I'm going to highlight the SEC game, we call it the game of the week, which is the Florida Gators versus the Utah Utes. Now, I recognize that most of you likely have no connection to SEC football or to the Florida Gators or to the Utah Utes. So I just happen to be here in Florida, and I think it's kind of cool to highlight an SEC game. As I mentioned earlier, I think that there's going to be two major power players as far as conferences in college football, and I think that that'll likely be the Big Ten and the SEC, based on how things have kind of shaken out with the TV contracts and whatnot. And so the Florida Gators will host Utah Utes. I believe Utah is. Let's not get into spreads. It doesn't matter. That's not this type of podcast. But I do think that Utah is favored, although it's a pretty slim margin. It's like 2 or 3 points, if I'm not mistaken. Utah is ranked 7th in the country. Florida's not ranked. But I think that Vegas is pretty smart, and I think they recognize that a Pac-12 team traveling to Florida, where it's muggy even when the sun goes down, and take on an SEC team, and Florida gets a lot of talent. I think they recognize that's going to be a tough challenge. So this one, I did quite a bit of research on, actually, and from what I see, I do believe Utah is the better team. From what I know personally of playing college football, and my team played at BYU, Utah, BYU. A lot of those Utah schools will have big older offensive linemen, big old Samoans that they a lot of them go on their mission trips due to their religion, and so a lot of them won't actually start playing college football until they're in their 20s, and so they got that man muscle on them already. And that's kind of the breakdown that I got off the research that I did, was that the Utah Utes are pretty tough and stout on the lines. When you think Pac-12 football, you don't think tough, physical, offensive and defensive lines. That's not the case, though, with Utah. Utah is one of those few schools in the Pac-12 that are very, very, very physical. They got a very good quarterback. This team should, by and large, win the game. But Florida is just loaded. They've got a lot of talent. First-year coach, Billy Napier, who coached Louisiana Raging Cajuns the last few years, and had a heck of a lot of success there. Like Anthony Richardson, the quarterback, number 15 for the Gators. Their O-line struggled last year. They look to be much better this year. You usually wouldn't hear a podcaster talk about the backup right tackle, but second string right tackle Austin Barber is a name that many Gopher fans who follow recruiting would remember, because he actually originally committed to the University of Minnesota. Then he is from Florida, so give him credit for that. He did flip his commitment to the Gators. This is his second year, so he's a true sophomore, maybe a redshirt freshman, I guess. Assuming he redshirted last year. And yeah, it looks like he's already a second string, and Billy Napier, the head coach, has just raved about him. So at some point, he could be starting this year. But that's neither here nor there. All the statistics and the research would lead one to believe that Utah will win this game. Apparently, the gamblers have been erring on the side of Florida, and I guess traditional wisdom would say, "Oh, Florida, they're an SEC team. Utah is a Pac-12 team. They're playing at Florida. Florida's going to win." I think it's more nuanced than that. I'd say if I had to put money on this game, I think I would put money on Utah, but I don't have to put my money on this game, and I'm just kind of going off my gut. I think Florida's going to win this game. I really do. I think Florida will find a way to win. And one thing is that, Utah doesn't need to win this game. If Utah loses, they could still win their conference championship and have a chance at making the playoffs. If they win this game and win their conference championship, then yeah. But obviously, if you win every game, you have a chance of making the playoffs, especially if you start the year ranked 7th in the country. But this isn't a conference game, and there's no shame in losing to Florida at Florida. I don't care who you are, maybe with the exception of Alabama. I think this gives me the vibes of last year, Ohio State going to Oregon, and they lost to Oregon. At the end of the year, Ohio State was still very much had a chance of making the playoffs if they didn't lose to Michigan. So I think that'll be the same case here in Utah. If Utah takes care of what they got to do in conference play, win, lose, or draw on Saturday against Florida, they'll be good. And so that's part of my logic, but I actually have Florida winning this one. And again, it's probably against all logic. Otherwise, I'm gonna end it there though. I am tired. It's been a long night. Been some traveling. It's been some fun watching the Gopher football game, and now I'm gonna sleep in this beautiful Clearwaterbeach, Florida. So I'll likely do another podcast very early next week, maybe Sunday. And who knows? Hopefully, I'll have some good outcomes with college football to make my preseason predictions look better. Right now, they're not looking so hot with Nebraska going 7-5. Yeah, that doesn't look very likely, and Northwestern going 3-9. That doesn't look very likely either. But we'll see, so we'll see how it shakes out. But otherwise, thank you all so much, man. This is a nice little community we got growing here. Please follow me on TikTok and Twitter at Minnesota Mikes. Please follow me on Instagram at Minnesota Mikes Podcast. And again, no matter where you're from, like I said, I was watching the game today with a Wisconsin Badger fan at a Packers bar. It matter who you are, where you're from. We're all on the same team here at the Minnesota Mikes Podcast. Thanks, y'all. Have a great night.
Steady heading. Don't nobody see the vision till after you made it. On the road to riches speeding, I just hope I'm not lost. Lost some homies, run away for them, I gotta push on. If you ain't here, it'll work, busky, you can get lost. Thought my heart was freezing, gotta let it defrost. On the road to riches speeding, I just hope I'm not lost. Lost some homies, run away for them, I gotta push on. If you ain't here, it'll work, busky, you can get lost. Thought my heart was freezing, gotta let it defrost. Young, black, and wild, and I know they hate it. Since I was a youngin', I've been counting payments. Open up the legs, it's got fans waiting. Let the haters hate, that's my motivation. On the away